Please try this, Senora. It is a special recipe.
It is absolutely delicious. You have done a miracle.
If your mother refuses one more meal, Vincent, I am sending her back to the hospital tonight. Dr. Daniel Reed's warnings settled over the Moretti dining room, as heavily as the gray September rain against the windows. Eleanor Moretti stared at a tray of poached salmon, mashed potatoes, and steamed asparagus. "Take it away." Vincent Moretti stood across from her in a tailored black suit. At 39, the white Italian-American mafia boss could silence a room with one glance. But neither authority nor money could make his mother lift a fork. For 3 months, Eleanor had survived mostly on prescribed nutrition drinks, broth, and intravenous fluids during 2 hospital stays. Medical tests had found no new physical cause, and Dr. Reed believed grief had worsened her loss of appetite. 5 private chefs had failed. The 6th had quit that morning. "You promised you would try," Vincent said. "I promised nothing." Eleanor pushed the tray toward the edge, but a pair of warm brown hands caught it. Grace Carter had arrived less than 20 minutes earlier as a temporary cook. Dr. Reed had asked the staffing agency for someone experienced with older adults suffering appetite loss, and Grace's years in private kitchens and community meal programs had qualified her. She was a 32-year-old black woman with deep brown skin, a full figure, calm dark eyes, and natural curls gathered into a neat bun. "Who allowed you in here?" Vincent asked. "Your house manager," Grace replied. She looked at Eleanor. "Does the smell make you sick, or does the food remind you that nothing tastes the way it used to?" Silence tightened around the table. "Both," Eleanor answered. Grace nodded. "Then I will not ask you to eat this." She carried the tray away. In the kitchen, Grace ignored the imported truffles and selected chicken, flour, butter, celery, onion, thyme, black pepper, and nutmeg. She added a small pinch of nutmeg to the dumpling dough, the distinctive finishing touch her grandmother had taught her. Butter whispered in a heavy pot, onions softened, and thyme released a warm, earthy fragrance. Vincent watched from the doorway. "My mother has rejected meals prepared by chefs who cook for presidents." "Then perhaps she does not need another chef trying to impress her," Grace said. "Perhaps she needs someone willing to listen." A faint sound came from the hallway. Eleanor stood there without her cane, one hand against the doorframe, staring at the steaming bowl. The aroma of thyme, brown butter, and nutmeg had reached a memory no expensive meal could touch. "Lillian?" she whispered. Grace froze. Eleanor crossed the kitchen slowly, sat down, and lifted the spoon with a trembling hand. She tasted the broth. Her eyes filled with tears, but she took a second spoonful. Then she looked directly at Grace and asked, "Where did you learn to make this?" Grace held Eleanor's gaze across the kitchen table. "My grandmother taught me. Her name was Lillian Carter." The spoon slipped from Eleanor's fingers and struck the edge of the bowl with a soft, metallic sound. Vincent moved toward his mother, but she raised one hand to stop him. All the color had drained from her face. "Lillian Carter is dead," she said. Grace's calm expression faltered. "She passed away 18 months ago." Eleanor pressed her fingertips against her lips. For a moment, she looked less like the commanding widow who had ruled the Moretti household for decades, and more like a frightened woman hearing that a locked door had finally opened. "Why are you here?" Vincent asked. His voice remained controlled, but suspicion sharpened every word. "Did your grandmother send you?" "A staffing agency sent me," Grace replied. "I accepted a temporary cooking job. I did not know this was your family's home until I saw the name on the front gate." Vincent studied her as if the truth might reveal itself through the smallest movement. Grace did not look away. Eleanor pulled the bowl closer and ate another spoonful. "Let her finish," she said. Vincent waited until his mother had eaten nearly half the serving before asking Grace to join him in his private study. Rain traced silver lines down the tall windows while he opened a desk drawer and removed a checkbook. "My mother has not eaten that much in months. Tell me what it will cost for you to stay." "The agency already gave you my hourly rate." "I am not discussing an hourly rate." Vincent wrote a figure and placed the check on the desk. Grace glanced at it. $25,000. She slid it back without touching anything else. "You asked what it would cost for me to stay. It will cost respect." Vincent leaned back slightly. Few people spoke to him with such directness. "Explain." "I decide what comes out of that kitchen. Nobody pressures your mother to clean a plate. Nobody treats the staff as if they are invisible. I receive the same fair wage we agreed on. And if I believe Eleanor needs medical attention, Dr. Reed makes that decision, not me." "You refuse $25,000 but demand authority in my house." "Only in the kitchen. You can keep the rest of the mansion." The corner of Vincent's mouth almost lifted, but his suspicion remained. "Why did my mother recognize that recipe?" "That is a question for her." Grace left the check on his desk and returned downstairs. Later that evening, she unpacked her knives and a worn recipe book from her canvas bag. A faded photograph slipped from between the pages. It showed a young Lillian standing beside another woman outside a neighborhood kitchen. Grace stared at the second woman, recognizing Eleanor's eyes beneath a much younger face. Behind the photograph was a sealed cream envelope in her grandmother's handwriting. Across the front were two words Grace had never expected to see inside the Moretti home: Eleanor Moretti. Grace did not open the envelope. Her grandmother had placed it inside the recipe book during her final week of life and given only one instruction: deliver it when the woman named on the front was ready to tell the truth. At breakfast the next morning, Grace prepared warm apple oatmeal with cinnamon and a small spoonful of brown sugar. She placed the bowl before Eleanor without asking her to eat. "My grandmother made this whenever I was afraid of school," Grace said. She believed cinnamon could make a difficult morning feel kinder. Eleanor lifted the spoon, tasted the oatmeal, and closed her eyes. She finished 6 bites before pushing the bowl away. Grace did not praise her or demand more. She simply covered the bowl and left it within reach. By noon, Eleanor had eaten another quarter of a cup. Over the next 4 days, Grace followed the same gentle rhythm. She served tomato soup with grilled cheese, chicken pot pie with a flaky crust, and baked peaches that filled the kitchen with the scent of butter and nutmeg. Each dish carried a small story about Lillian, but Grace never mentioned the envelope. Eleanor began walking downstairs for her meals, and Dr. Reed noted by Friday afternoon that her weight had finally stabilized. Vincent watched every change with growing amazement and deeper suspicion. Because Grace had signed the staffing agency's standard background authorization, he asked his security director to verify only the employment references supplied by the agency and publicly available records related to any connection with the Moretti family. The review found no undisclosed relationship or suspicious payment. It showed 12 years of kitchen work, excellent references, and a modest apartment in Queens. It also revealed that Grace spent every Saturday cooking at the Carter Community Table, a neighborhood food pantry that struggled to remain open. Vincent drove there without announcing himself. Through the front window, he saw Grace serving vegetable stew to families seated at folding tables. She remembered names, food allergies, and which elderly guests needed containers to take home. When a volunteer apologized because they had only 50 servings for nearly 70 people, Grace removed her own lunch from the refrigerator and divided it among 3 containers. She had less than nearly everyone in Vincent's world, yet she gave without making anyone feel indebted. He left before she noticed him. That evening, Vincent entered the mansion kitchen while Grace kneaded biscuit dough. "You operate a food pantry," he said. "I help operate one. You did not include it on your employment application. Community service is not employment. You could have asked me for funding." Grace dusted flour from her hands. "You still believe every problem is waiting for your money?" Vincent had no answer. Eleanor appeared in the doorway holding the faded photograph Grace had left beside the recipe book. Her gaze settled on the sealed envelope. "Lillian kept this picture all those years. It was one of her most treasured possessions," Grace said. Eleanor lowered herself into a chair, her composure breaking beneath the weight of an old memory. "Before she died," she asked quietly, "did Lillian ever forgive me?" Grace rested both hands on the flour-dusted counter. "My grandmother never spoke about you with anger, but she never told me what happened. If you want the answer inside that envelope, you must tell the truth first." Eleanor looked toward Vincent, and Grace saw the old instinct to remain silent return to her face. Vincent pulled out a chair and sat beside his mother rather than standing over her. "I need to hear it too," he said. Eleanor stared at the faded photograph. "Lillian and I met when we were 19. We worked in a church kitchen in Brooklyn before I married your father. She could make a meal for 20 people with whatever was left in the pantry, and she never allowed anyone to feel ashamed for being hungry." A faint smile touched Eleanor's face, then disappeared. "After my marriage, I hired her to cook here. She was my friend, but your father insisted that the staff treat me like their employer. Lillian was the only person who still called me Ellie." Grace remained silent, giving Eleanor room to continue. 27 years ago, a diamond brooch disappeared before a charity dinner. Your father said he found the empty case in Lillian's room. He dismissed her before I could speak to her alone. Vincent's jaw tightened. "Did anyone contact the police?" "No. He said public attention would embarrass the family. He offered her money if she signed a statement accepting responsibility and promised never to return." "Did she sign it?" Grace asked. "She tore the statement in half and walked out without taking $1. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I knew Lillian would never steal from me. I knew it. Yet I stood beside my husband because I was afraid of what defying him would cost. She looked at me before she left. She did not ask me to save her job. She only asked me to say that I believed her. I said nothing." The kitchen seemed to grow smaller around the three of them. Vincent remembered his father describing loyalty as obedience. But for the first time, he understood how many people had paid for that belief. "Why did you stop eating now?" he asked. Eleanor traced one finger over Lillian's face in the photograph. "A letter arrived from the Carter Community Table 3 months ago. It invited me to an annual fundraiser in Lillian's memory and mentioned that she had died. I realized I had waited so long to apologize that there was nobody left to receive it. Every meal reminded me of the woman I had abandoned." Grace sat across from her. "My grandmother did not spend her life waiting for your apology. She raised a family, fed her neighbors, and taught me that dignity does not depend on whether powerful people recognize it." Eleanor lowered her head. "Then why can I not forgive myself?" "Because refusing to live is not accountability. It is another way of avoiding what must be repaired." Grace placed the sealed envelope before her but kept one hand on it. Eleanor drew a slow breath, excused herself, and returned several minutes later with a small brass key she had kept in a locked jewelry box. She turned toward Vincent. "Your father kept a locked drawer in his private desk. He made me promise never to open it. I think it is time you broke that promise." Vincent carried the brass key to his father's private study. a room left untouched since Anthony Moretti died 4 years earlier. Eleanor followed with Grace beside her, still holding the sealed envelope. Vincent unlocked the bottom drawer, but it caught after 2 inches. He found a concealed latch beneath the desktop, and a second compartment slid forward. Inside rested a blue velvet box, several yellowed receipts, and a leather folder bearing Anthony's initials. Eleanor opened the box. The diamond brooch lay inside, intact and unmistakable. He had it all this time. One receipt came from a Manhattan jeweler who had cleaned and reset the brooch 11 months after Lillian was dismissed. Another documented a cash withdrawal equal to the amount Anthony had offered Lillian for signing the false statement. A memorandum bearing Richard Moretti's signature confirmed that Anthony had ordered him to preserve the theft story, even though the brooch remained in family custody. The final item was an unsent letter written during the last year of Anthony's life. Anthony admitted that Lillian had encouraged Eleanor to seek independence and challenged his control over the household. He had hidden the brooch, accused Lillian, and expected money to guarantee her silence. When she refused, he allowed the lie to remain. Eleanor sank into the desk chair. I built my life around a man who believed love meant obedience. Grace placed the sealed envelope before her. You know the truth now. This belongs to you. Eleanor covered it with both hands but did not open it. Not yet. Lillian waited 27 years for her name to be cleared. Her word should not become another secret read behind a closed door. Vincent gathered the evidence. My attorneys will authenticate everything and provide copies to the foundation board. Until that review begins, nobody outside this room hears about it. Why? Grace asked. My mother is recovering. Public attention could damage her health. Dr. Reed should decide what her health can withstand. I am protecting her. Your father used the same word. Vincent's expression hardened, but Grace did not retreat. There is a difference between protecting someone and making every choice for them. You found proof that a woman was falsely accused, yet your first instinct is to lock it away. Eleanor turned to her son. Grace is right. Vincent respected Grace's courage, but respect had created a new fear. Richard controlled several charities and legitimate Moretti holdings, and he had spent decades enforcing the family's code of silence beside Anthony. Requesting foundation records would alert him within hours. If the truth became public, Grace would stand at the center of a conflict she had never chosen. That evening, Vincent ordered a full review of the family records. Then he wrote a check for 3 months of Grace's wages and placed it inside an envelope marked as severance. He told himself that sending her away would keep her safe. The next morning, Grace opened her kitchen locker and found the envelope on top of her recipe book. Grace read the severance letter twice before carrying it to Vincent's study. He stood near the window speaking with one of his attorneys, but he ended the call when he saw the envelope in her hand. Grace placed it on his desk beside the returned $25,000 check. You promised me authority in the kitchen, she said. You never promised me honesty, so perhaps I should not be surprised. Richard learned that I reopened my father's records, Vincent replied. If he discovers your connection to Lillian, he will make you the center of this family's scandal. Then you speak to me, and I decide whether I am willing to face that. You do not understand the influence he has. You do not understand that my life still belongs to me. Vincent moved around the desk, lowering his voice. I am trying to keep you safe. Grace met his eyes without anger, which made her words harder for him to dismiss. Your father decided Lillian was dangerous because she gave Eleanor choice. He removed her and called it protection. You decided I was in danger, removed me, and used the same word. Vincent looked at the severance envelope. For the first time, he saw more than a payment. He saw a decision made without Grace's consent and a locked door disguised as generosity. "I can withdraw it," he said. "That does not erase the fact that you signed it." Grace returned to the kitchen and prepared Eleanor's breakfast before packing her knives. She made soft scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and baked apples with cinnamon. Eleanor ate several bites while Grace explained that she was leaving. "Did Vincent dismiss you because of me?" Eleanor asked. "He dismissed me because he was afraid. Fear explains a choice, but it does not make the choice respectful." Eleanor reached for Grace's hand. "I will not ask you to stay in a place where your dignity is treated as negotiable." Grace squeezed her fingers gently. "Keep eating because you want your life back, not because I am standing beside the stove." She left the mansion shortly before noon with her canvas bag, recipe book, and the same quiet composure she had carried through the front door 1 week earlier. At dinner, Eleanor sat before a bowl prepared by another cook. She lifted the spoon but could not swallow more than a taste. Dr. Reed persuaded her to drink half a prescribed nutrition shake, yet the solid meal remained untouched. Vincent stood in the doorway, burdened by a silence his authority could not command. "You sent away the first person who treated me like a human being instead of a problem," Eleanor said. "I thought Richard would target her." "Then you should have stood beside her. Protection without trust is only another form of control." The next afternoon, Vincent drove himself to Queens while one security vehicle followed at a distance. He asked the team to remain several blocks away and entered the Carter community table without his tailored jacket. Grace was arranging bowls along a folding table when she saw him. Vincent picked up an apron, stood before the woman he had tried to remove from his life, and said, "Tell me where to begin." Grace studied Vincent for several seconds, then pointed toward a stack of empty bowls. "Begin by placing one bowl at every seat. After that, carry the water pitchers." She did not thank him for coming, and Vincent did not explain who he was. For the next 3 hours, he followed instructions. He filled glasses, wiped tables, carried boxes of canned vegetables, and listened as Grace greeted every guest by name. Nobody cared about his expensive watch or the authority attached to the Moretti name. An elderly man asked him for another piece of cornbread, and a little girl corrected the way he folded a paper napkin. Grace watched him accept both moments without irritation. When the final table had been cleared, Vincent removed the apron and stood across from her in the quiet pantry. "I came to apologize," he said. "Not to convince you that my intentions were good. They do not excuse what I did." Grace closed a container of leftover stew. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" "For deciding that I understood your safety better than you did. For treating your employment like something I could end without a conversation. For repeating the behavior I condemned in my father." Grace searched his face for the familiar certainty of a man expecting forgiveness. She found none. "Your mother still needs help," Vincent continued. "She drank part of a nutrition shake last night, but she barely touched her meal. I'm asking you to return. You will set the terms." 3 terms, Grace said. Eleanor continues working with Dr. Reed and begins counseling for her grief. Every household employee receives a written contract, fair overtime pay, and the right to report mistreatment without retaliation. You do not investigate, monitor, or make personal decisions for me without my knowledge. Vincent nodded. Agreed. I have not forgiven you. I understand. Grace returned to the mansion the following morning for Eleanor, not for Vincent. Eleanor accepted the conditions and scheduled her first counseling appointment. Vincent ordered an independent review of every household employee's wages. By the end of the week, the kitchen staff had received written contracts, the payroll audit was underway, and the first overdue overtime payments had been issued. Grace noticed that Vincent did not announce what he had done. He simply corrected it. Their conversation slowly became easier. He began joining Eleanor in the kitchen for breakfast, where Grace taught him how to shape biscuit dough without overworking it. His first batch came out uneven, but Eleanor ate one with strawberry preserves and asked for another. Grace laughed, and Vincent realized how much he had missed that sound during her absence. Earlier that week, Eleanor had also asked Grace to supervise the menu for the Foundation's charity dinner. One evening, after the event menu had been approved, Vincent helped Grace wash dishes after the staff had gone home. Their hands reached for the same plate and both paused. There was no command in his eyes and no fear in hers, only the quiet recognition that trust was returning one careful choice at a time. The moment ended when Vincent's telephone rang. Richard Moretti was calling about the Family Foundation's charity dinner scheduled for the next evening. "I invited the press," Richard said. "They deserve to know that your mother's new cook is the granddaughter of a thief." Vincent ended the call and told Grace exactly what Richard had planned. "I can cancel the dinner," he said, "or I can keep the press outside." Grace dried her hands and faced him. "If I hide, Richard controls the story. Lillian already lost 27 years to this lie. I will not give it another evening." Eleanor entered the kitchen carrying the sealed envelope and the leather folder from Anthony's desk. "Neither will I." The following night, more than 200 donors gathered in a Manhattan hotel ballroom for the Moretti Foundation's annual charity dinner. Grace had supervised a menu inspired by the Carter Community Table, including chicken with dumplings, roasted vegetables, and baked peaches. She wore a deep blue dress and stood beside the kitchen staff, refusing Vincent's offer to place her at a private table where reporters could not reach her. Without warning, Richard stepped onto the stage before dessert and replaced the approved presentation with a photograph of Grace. "Before we celebrate tonight's charitable work, our family deserves honesty about the woman who has gained access to Eleanor Moretti's home." Murmurs moved across the ballroom. Her grandmother, Lillian Carter, was dismissed from the Moretti household after stealing a valuable diamond brooch. Cameras turned toward Grace. Richard continued. "Now her granddaughter has returned, presenting herself as a caregiver while accepting the family's trust." Vincent rose, but Eleanor touched his arm. "This is not your truth to tell," she said. Leaning on her cane, Eleanor crossed the ballroom. Grace supported her to the stage, then stepped back so Eleanor could face the room herself. Eleanor placed the blue velvet box on the podium and opened it. The brooch flashed beneath the ballroom lights. "Lillian Carter never stole this," Eleanor said. "My late husband hid it in his desk and accused an innocent woman because she encouraged me to make my own choices." She displayed the jeweler's receipt, Richard's signed memorandum, and Anthony's written confession. "I knew Lillian was honest, yet I remained silent." Richard also knew the accusation was false, and he helped preserve it to protect this family's reputation. Richard moved toward the microphone, but Vincent informed him that the Foundation's attorneys had preliminarily authenticated Anthony's handwriting, confirmed the jeweler's records, and provided copies of every document to the directors. After an emergency vote in an adjoining room, the board suspended Richard from all Foundation responsibilities pending an independent review. Eleanor then opened Lillian's envelope with trembling fingers. The letter did not demand money or revenge. Lillian wrote that she had forgiven Eleanor years earlier, but forgiveness could not replace truth. She asked Eleanor to use whatever time remained to feed people who had been made to feel invisible. The ballroom fell silent. Eleanor returned to her table, lifted a spoonful of Grace's chicken and dumplings, and ate it before every guest and camera. Then she asked for a second serving. Applause spread through the room, but Grace kept her eyes on Vincent. Later, when they stood alone outside the ballroom, he said, "Your grandmother finally has justice." "Yes," Grace replied. But justice does not mean that I owe you my heart. Vincent held Grace's gaze beneath the hotel's entrance lights. I know, he said. Your heart is yours. I only want the chance to earn a place in your life, if you choose to give me one. Grace studied him, remembering the man who had once placed his severance check in her locker rather than risk an honest conversation. Then give me time to see whether your actions continue after the cameras leave. Take all the time you need. 9 months later, the Moretti Foundation completed its independent review. Richard resigned from every position he held, and the foundation issued a public statement clearing Lillian Carter's name. Eleanor sent a formal apology to Lillian's surviving family, and the foundation published a permanent correction in its public records. She also began weekly counseling and continued meeting with Dr. Reed. Her recovery was not immediate or perfect. Some mornings, grief still closed her throat after only a few bites. But she no longer treated a difficult meal as failure. She drank her prescribed nutrition shake, rested, and tried again later. By the following June, she had regained 11 pounds and could walk through the mansion garden without assistance. The Carter Community Table moved from its cramped storefront into a renovated neighborhood building with a commercial kitchen, classrooms, and enough seating for 100 guests. Eleanor invested part of her personal fortune, but Grace insisted that the organization remain independent from the Moretti family. Its new name appeared above the entrance in simple gold letters: the Lillian and Eleanor Community Table. Grace became its culinary director with full authority over staffing, menus, and community programs. Vincent attended meetings only when invited. He never placed his name on the building and never asked for public credit. Instead, he spent Saturday mornings unloading produce, repairing folding chairs, and learning to follow Grace's instructions without turning them into negotiations. Trust returned through ordinary moments. Grace saw him listen when employees disagreed with him. Vincent saw her build a kitchen where nobody was judged for needing help. Their affection grew slowly, without promises either of them was ready to make. One evening after closing, Vincent found Grace checking inventory in the pantry. I would like to take you to dinner Friday, he said. Not for business, not at the mansion, and not somewhere you are expected to cook. Grace raised an eyebrow. Are you asking instead of arranging? I am learning, she smiled. Friday at 7. That Sunday, they brought Eleanor to the community kitchen for its first public meal. She sat beneath the framed photograph of herself and Lillian as young women, surrounded by neighbors sharing warm bowls of chicken and dumplings. Grace served Eleanor a modest portion, and Vincent sat beside them without commanding the room. Eleanor finished every spoonful. Then she held out her bowl and said, I would like a little more. Grace served her a second helping. Eleanor looked at her son and smiled. Do not make this woman wait as long as I waited to tell the truth. Vincent turned to Grace, but he did not answer for her. Grace placed the serving spoon down, took the empty seat beside him, and reached for his hand by her own choice.